Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be discussing how to rationalize an expression like the one you see on your screen. When we discuss rationalizing, really our goal when we rationalize is we want to end up with an expression that has no radicals in the denominator. The other requirement, though, is that the value of our original expression should be preserved. So before we talk about how to rationalize this expression, let's actually review a couple of things. So what I want to review is multiplying expressions that look like this. So remember that when I have one group of terms being multiplied by another group of terms, it's going to involve a lot of distributing. So here we go. Our first step is to take this first term in the first group, and we're going to distribute that term all the way through the second group. So 2 square root of 3 times another 2 square root of 3. Remember the shortcut for that is I multiply my numbers on the outside, so 2 times 2 is 4. And then I can also multiply the numbers under the square root. So square root of 3 times square root of 3 just gives me 3 times 3 under the square root. Okay, then I have to multiply my 2 square root of 3 by negative 4. So notice negative 4 is not under a square root, so when I multiply these guys together, I'm going to start by multiplying 2 times negative 4. That's going to be minus 8. And then the square root of 3 is just going to stay square root of 3. Okay, so I'm done with that. I'm done with the first term. Now I need to multiply the 4 all the way through the second group. So I need to distribute that 4 through that second group. So 4 times 2 square root of 3, again the 4 and the 2 are not under square roots, so when I multiply those guys together, I get 8 square root of 3. And then finally I've got 4 times negative 4 at the end, so that gives me minus 16. Okay. So from here, we can do a little bit of simplifying because I want you to note that I've got 3 times 3 under the square root. And so remember, square root undoes squares. So when I have two factors that are the same, I just end up with, in this case, 3. So I end up with 4 times 3. So the square root is just undoing this 3 squared that I have. Okay, then I want you to notice that I have minus 8 square root of 3 plus 8 square root of 3. Those are opposites of each other. Specifically, they're what we call additive inverses. So whenever I combine additive inverses, I get 0. And then at the end, I have minus 16. So then I'm left with, if I multiply, I've got 4 times 3 is 12, minus 16 gives me negative 4. So one of the things I want you to note is that even though I started with square roots in both groups, my final answer had no square roots in it. It actually just became a rational number. So look at the relationship between my two starting groups. Notice this one is 2 root 3 plus 4. This one is 2 root 3 minus 4. These guys are what we call conjugates of each other. And so if I want to end up with no square roots, I just want you to notice that, at least in this case, when we multiplied the two conjugates together, we ended up with no square roots. We just ended up with that negative 4. So let's see how that might play out in the problem that we were looking at. So we had square root of 6 minus 2 on the bottom. So what I'm going to do to rationalize the denominators, actually, I kind of alluded to it in the background section. I'm actually going to multiply top and bottom by the conjugate of the bottom. So step 1 is to multiply top and bottom by the conjugate of the bottom. Okay, so I've got 3 square root of 6 minus 5 over square root of 6 minus 2. And then what I'm going to do is multiply top and bottom by the conjugate of square root of 6 minus 2. So how do I get the conjugate? Well, I keep the first term the same, so I'm just going to keep the square root of 6 the same. And then I'm going to change the minus 2 to a plus 2. Now remember, my goal is to preserve the original value of the fraction. So if I don't want the original value of the fraction to change, whatever I multiply the bottom by, I have to multiply the top by the same thing. Okay, so from here, what I want to do is multiply my bottoms out, and then multiply my tops out, and just hope or see if I end up with no radicals on the bottom. So we saw that in the background section when we multiplied the conjugates together, that we ended up with just a rational number, and I'm hoping that happens here. So here we go. So when we multiply the bottoms together, we've got square root of 6 times square root of 6. I have to distribute. So square root of 6 times square root of 6 just gives me the square root of 6 times 6 underneath the radical. Okay, then I've got square root of 6 times 2. Notice the 2 is not under a square root and the 6 is. So when I multiply those together, I get plus 2 times the square root of 6. And then I need to distribute this negative 2 through. So negative 2 times square root of 6 is going to be minus 2 square root of 6. And then negative 2 times 2 gives me minus 4 at the end. Okay, if we do the tops, 3 square root of 6 times square root of 6 gives me 3 times the square root of 6 times 6. 3 square root of 6 times 2 gives me 6 square root of 6. Then I've got negative 5 times the square root of 6 gives me minus 5 square root of 6. And then I've got negative 5 times 2, which gives me minus 10 at the end. Okay, so our second step then is just to simplify what we have right here. So step 2, we just want to clean this up a little bit. So we want to simplify what we have. So if we look at the top, you've got 3 times the square root of 6 times 6. Well, the square root of 6 times 6, that's just 6, because remember, square root undoes squares. So what I'm left with on top is just 3 times 6. And then it looks like I've got some like terms there, because I've got 6 square root of 6 minus 5 square root of 6. So what I'm going to end up with is 6 minus 5 is 1 square root of 6. So I get plus 1 square root of 6. Think of it as just like adding 6y to negative 5y. So 6y minus 5y is 1y. Same thing here. My common unit is square root of 6. Okay, and then at the end I have minus 10. Okay, on the bottom, I've got square root of 6 times 6. So again, that just simplifies to 6. And then notice I have plus 2 square root of 6 minus 2 square root of 6. Well, those are additive inverses again, so those are just going to make 0 when I combine them. So that means at the end I'm just left with minus 4. Okay, final steps. 3 times 6 on top is 18. I don't need to write the 1 in front of my square root of 6, so I'm just going to write the square root of 6 minus 10. And then on the bottom, 6 minus 4 is 2. So then from here, I've got 18 and then minus 10 at the end. I can combine those. Those are like terms. So 18 minus 10 is 8 plus the square root of 6 over 2. And that's actually as far as I can go. So I don't want to go any further than that, because while I could reduce the 8 over 2 part, the problem is both of these terms are being divided by 2. So unless I can simplify both of them, and unless 2 is a common factor of both terms, I actually just want to stop here. So, and I want you to notice though, the bottom again doesn't have any radicals in it, and that was really my original goal. So I have accomplished my original goal. Okay, so here's another problem.